Imagine the Sahara Desert, not as a vast, arid wasteland, but as a lush paradise teeming with life. Just 6,000 years ago, this iconic desert was covered with rivers, lakes, and dense vegetation. How did it transform into the largest hot desert on Earth? And could it become green again in the future? Stick around, because the answers are as shocking as they are fascinating. The Sahara Desert stretches across 3.6 million square miles, dominating North Africa with its harsh, unforgiving landscape. It's one of the most extreme environments on Earth. But here's what most people don't know. It wasn't always this way. If you were to travel back in time just a few thousand years, you'd find a place bursting with life, a region home to animals, plants, and even thriving human communities. Scientists now know that the Sahara has undergone massive transformations, flipping between a green, fertile landscape and a dry desert multiple times over the last several 100,000 years. But how do we know this? And what caused these changes? The Sahara today is inhospitable, with temperatures soaring above 120 degrees and little to no rainfall. For decades, researchers assumed it had always been this way, an unchanging desert. But as scientists began digging into its past, they uncovered evidence that flipped this narrative on its head. Fossilized fish bones, ancient cave paintings, and sediment samples all pointed to a startling truth. The Sahara wasn't always dry. The big question is, what caused such a dramatic shift in the first place? And more importantly, could it happen again? To understand how the Sahara transformed from a lush paradise into the barren desert we know today, we need to talk about Earth's climate cycles. These cycles are controlled by something called the Milankovitch cycles, variations in Earth's orbit, tilt, and wobble that occur over tens of thousands of years. About 10,000 years ago, these cycles aligned in a way that increased the intensity of the African monsoon, a seasonal rain system that brings water to the continent. This surge in rainfall turned the Sahara into a thriving Greenland. Rivers flowed where there's now nothing but dunes, and massive lakes formed, including one as large as today's Great Lakes in North America. Evidence of this greener Sahara, often called the African humid period, comes from surprising sources. Deep beneath the desert sands, scientists have found ancient riverbeds that once carried water for hundreds of miles. Satellite images reveal the outlines of these rivers, hinting at a very different past. And then there are the fossils. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of fish, crocodiles, and hippos, animals that could only have thrived in a wet, fertile environment. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from ancient rock art. Scattered across the Sahara are thousands of petroglyphs, or carvings, depicting scenes of life during this humid period. They show people herding cattle, hunting, and living alongside animals like giraffes and elephants. These images offer a rare glimpse into a time when the Sahara was a cradle of human civilization. But this paradise didn't last. About 6,000 years ago, the same cycles that brought rain began to shift. The monsoon weakened, and the Sahara started drying out. The once flourishing lakes and rivers disappeared, and vegetation gave way to sand dunes. What's fascinating is how quickly this change happened. Studies suggest that the Sahara transitioned from a lush landscape to a desert in just a few hundred years, a blink of an eye in geological terms. Imagine living in a place where your environment transforms so drastically that survival becomes nearly impossible. For many of the people living there, migration was the only option. Now here's the million-dollar question. Could the Sahara become green again? The answer is possibly. Scientists believe that as Earth's orbit continues to shift, we may see another African humid period in the future, though not anytime soon. Some models predict that this could happen in about 10,000 years. But there's another twist to this story: human activity. Climate change driven by greenhouse gas emissions is altering weather patterns across the globe. And some researchers believe it could delay or even prevent the Sahara's natural greening cycle. On the flip side, some ambitious projects are already trying to bring green back to the Sahara. One example is the Great Green Wall Initiative, which aims to plant a massive belt of trees across the southern edge of the desert. The goal is to combat desertification and restore ecosystems. While this won't transform the Sahara back into a rainforest, it's a step toward making the region more hospitable. And then there's the possibility of geoengineering, using technology to manipulate the environment. Some scientists have proposed creating artificial rain or redirecting rivers to re-wet parts of the Sahara. These ideas are controversial, but they show how humans are beginning to think about reshaping the planet on a massive scale. So here's what we've learned. The Sahara wasn't always a desert. Just 6,000 years ago, It was a lush, vibrant place filled with life. This transformation is a powerful reminder of how Earth's climate is always changing, often in ways that seem unimaginable. But the Sahara's story isn't just about the past. It's also a window into the future. Whether through natural cycles or human intervention, the Sahara could look very different thousands of years from now. The more we study this incredible region, the more we realize how connected it is to the rest of the world. The Sahara's story is ultimately a story about resilience, adaptation, and the ever-changing nature of our planet.